The morning started like any other morning in Reed Ridge, with my mother's voice cutting through the thin walls of our cramped house like a rusty saw. "Mara, get your lazy behind out of bed and fetch the water before the sun gets high." I opened my eyes to the familiar cracks in the ceiling, counting them like I'd done every morning for the past 26 years. 14 cracks spreading out like spider webs from the corner where the roof leaked every time it rained. I knew every stain, every discoloration, every imperfection in that ceiling better than I knew my own reflection. Maybe because I spent more time looking up than I did looking in mirrors. "Maribel, I swear if I have to come in there—" "I'm up, Ma." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, feeling the familiar protest in my knees, the way my body seemed to argue with every movement lately. At 26, I already felt ancient. Or maybe that's just what happens when you spend your whole life carrying weight. Not just your own, but everyone else's judgment, too. I pulled on the same brown dress I'd worn for 3 days straight, the one with the patch on the left side where I'd caught it on a fence post last month. My wardrobe consisted of 4 dresses, all of them brown or gray, all of them shapeless enough to hide what the town of Reed Ridge had decided was my greatest shame: my size. The kitchen was already thick with heat, even though it couldn't have been past 6 in the morning. Ma stood at the stove, her thin frame rigid with the kind of constant disapproval she wore like other women wore perfume. "There's no eggs," she said without turning around. "Mrs. Henderson's chickens aren't laying, and we can't afford to buy from the Mercantile. I can check the—" "Don't bother. Those useless birds of ours haven't laid a decent egg in weeks." She finally turned to look at me, her eyes doing that quick, dismissive scan they always did, like she was inventorying my failures. "You'll have to make do with bread and that jam that's probably going bad." I didn't point out that the jam was fine, that I'd checked it just yesterday. Arguing with Ma was like arguing with a thunderstorm, pointless and likely to leave you soaked and miserable. I was reaching for the bread when we heard it, the sound of horses, lots of them, and voices carrying up from the main street. Reed Ridge wasn't a big town, maybe 300 people on a good day, and the sound of that many horses meant something was happening, something official. Ma's face went pale, actually pale, which I'd never seen before. Her hand went to her throat, fingers clutching at the collar of her faded dress. "No," she whispered. "Not today. They can't be doing it today." "Doing what?" I asked, but she was already moving toward the door, and I was following because that knot of dread in my stomach told me I needed to know, even if I didn't want to. The main street of Reed Ridge was packed. Every shop had people spilling out onto the wooden walkways. Every window had faces pressed against the glass. In the center of it all, mounted on a huge black horse, was Sheriff Drummond. Sheriff Drummond was the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from the same rock as the mountains surrounding our town, hard, weathered, and completely unmovable. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, and in that time he'd made it clear that his word was law, his law was absolute, and anyone who disagreed could take it up with the barrel of his Colt revolver. "Ladies and gentlemen of Reed Ridge," his voice boomed across the square, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "As you all know, our town has been facing a crisis. We've got too many men and not enough families. We've got too many unmarried women taking up resources without contributing to the future of this community." I felt Ma's hand grip my arm, her fingernails digging in through the fabric of my sleeve. "The town council has voted, and I've made my decision. Today, we're going to solve this problem the only way that makes sense. Every unmarried woman between the ages of 16 and 40 is to report to the town square within the hour. Every able-bodied single man will have the opportunity to choose a wife." The word choose hit me like a physical blow. Choose. Like we were items in the Mercantile, like we were horses at auction. The crowd erupted, women screaming, men shouting, but Sheriff Drummond just sat there on his horse, his face showing about as much emotion as a fence post. "This is not optional," he continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Any woman who refuses will be fined $50 and evicted from Reed Ridge. Any family who harbors a woman refusing to participate will face the same penalty." $50. We didn't have 50 cents. An eviction meant what? There was nothing outside of Reed Ridge for miles except scrubland and desert. Eviction was a death sentence. I started, but she was already pulling me back toward our house, her movements jerky and panicked. "We have to get you ready," she said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "We have to make you look. We have to try." 20 minutes later, I was standing in our kitchen wearing the only dress I owned that wasn't brown, a faded blue thing that Ma had worn when she was younger and considerably smaller. She'd let out the seams as much as she could, but it still pulled tight across my chest and hips, making me look like a sausage stuffed into casing meant for something half its size. Ma stood behind me, yanking a brush through my hair with enough force to make my eyes water. "Stop squirming," she hissed. "We need to at least try to make you presentable." "Presentable for what?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "You think any man in this town is going to choose me? You think putting me in a too small dress and pinning up my hair is going to suddenly make me invisible, different?" The brush stopped mid-stroke. In the small mirror propped on the kitchen table, I could see Ma's face, and for just a second, something flickered across it. Sadness, maybe. Or regret. "You're my daughter," she said quietly. "I have to try." We walked to the town square in silence, joining the stream of women and their families all heading in the same direction. I recognized most of them. Sarah Miller, who worked at the post office, Rebecca Jones, whose father ran the stable, young Emma Watson, who couldn't have been more than 17 and looked absolutely terrified. And then there was Catherine Fairfax. Catherine glided down the street like she was floating on air, her blonde hair perfectly curled, her dress a confection of white lace and ribbons that probably cost more than our house. She had 3 younger sisters trailing behind her, all of them beautiful in that delicate porcelain doll way that men in Reedridge seemed to value above all else. She saw me watching and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Well, Mara," she said, loud enough for everyone around us to hear. "I suppose even you have to participate, though I can't imagine it will take long for the men to make their selections." Her sisters giggled, their laughter like tinkling bells designed specifically to make my skin crawl. I didn't respond. What was the point? Catherine Fairfax had been tormenting me since we were children, and nothing I said or did had ever made a difference. She was beautiful, wealthy, and cruel, a combination that Reedridge seemed to find endlessly appealing. The town square had been transformed. Someone had built a raised platform in the center, and Sheriff Drummond stood on it like a ringmaster at a circus. Around the platform, they'd roped off an area with wooden barriers, creating a kind of pen. A pen for us. For the women. "All unmarried women inside the barrier," Drummond called out. "Families can watch from the sides. Men who wish to participate line up on the north side. We'll do this organized and proper." Organized and proper. Like that made it any less horrifying. I climbed over the barrier, climbed, not stepped gracefully like Catherine and her sisters, and found myself standing in the dirt with about 20 other women. Some were crying, some looked defiant, most just looked scared. The crowd around us was growing. It seemed like the entire town had turned out to watch this spectacle. I saw Mr. Henderson from the general store, Mrs. Palmer, who ran the boarding house, even old Doc Morrison, who'd delivered half the babies in Reedridge over the past 40 years. They were all here to watch us be divided up like parcels. "This is barbaric," someone muttered behind me. I turned to see Sarah Miller, her face flushed with anger. "This is absolutely barbaric." "Welcome to Reedridge," I replied, "where barbaric is just another word for Tuesday." Sarah let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. "My mother is over there crying like I'm being sent to the gallows." "Maybe I am." "Do you see the men lined up?" I looked. There were maybe 15 men standing in the designated area, and calling some of them men was generous. I recognized old Pete Marston, who had to be pushing 70 and smelled like whiskey and regret. There was Tom Bracken, who'd been married 3 times already and buried all 3 wives under circumstances that were considered suspicious by everyone except Sheriff Drummond. There was Billy Foster, who was 18 years old and still lived with his mother, and Marcus Webb, who'd lost his hand in a mining accident and spent most of his time bitter and drunk. "We're doomed," Sarah said flatly. Before I could respond, Sheriff Drummond raised his hand, calling for silence. "Gentlemen," he announced, "you may now make your selections. Step forward, state your choice clearly, and we'll make it official. The lady must agree. This isn't slavery, after all." The lady must agree. like we had a real choice, with eviction and death as the alternative. Old Pete Marston stepped forward first, his roomy eyes scanning the pen like he was shopping for vegetables. His gaze landed on Emma Watson, and I felt my stomach turn. "That young one there," he said, pointing. "The brunette with the pink ribbon." Emma's face went white. She looked at Sheriff Drummond, then at her parents in the crowd, then back at Pete Marston. She started, her voice barely a whisper. "Speak up, girl," Drummond barked. "I agree," Emma said, and started to cry. That's how it went. One by one, men stepped forward and pointed at women like they were choosing livestock. Tom Bracken picked a widow named Ann Thornton, who looked resigned to her fate. Billy Foster chose Rebecca Jones after his mother literally shoved him forward and told him to pick someone. Marcus Webb selected Sarah Miller, and I watched my friend's face crumble as she nodded her agreement. The crowd around us was eating it up, their voices rising and falling with each selection, some cheering, some offering commentary that ranged from supportive to cruel. "Look at that! Tom Bracken's going for number 4. Billy Foster finally getting himself a wife. His mother must be thrilled. Poor Sarah Miller, stuck with Webb and his drinking. And through it all, I stood there, watching the pen empty around me. Catherine Fairfax was chosen by a wealthy rancher named Richard Sutton. Of course she was. Her sisters went next, each of them picked by respectable men with money and prospects. The crowd's attention started to shift. I could feel it, the way you can feel a storm coming before the first drops of rain. People were looking at me now, and it wasn't the usual dismissive glances I was used to. This was something else. This was anticipation, entertainment. "Well," someone in the crowd said loudly, "looks like we're down to the last few selections. Wonder who'll get desperate enough to pick Maribel." Laughter rippled through the audience. Not quiet laughter, not embarrassed laughter. Full-throated amusement, like I was a comedian who'd just delivered a punchline. I felt my face burning, heat spreading from my cheeks down my neck. I wanted to run, wanted to climb over that barrier and keep running until I hit the desert and died of exposure, because at least that would be private. At least that would be dignified. But Ma was out there in the crowd, and I could see her face. She looked broken. Like she'd finally accepted what I'd known all along, that I was an embarrassment, a burden, a daughter who would never be anything but a disappointment. "Quiet down," Sheriff Drummond called, but he was smiling. Actually smiling, like this was all good fun. "We've still got a few men who haven't made their selections. We've got time." But we didn't have time, not really. The sun was climbing higher, the heat was becoming oppressive, and there were only 3 of us left in the pen now. Me, a woman named Martha, who was in her late 30s and had a reputation for being difficult, and a girl named Jane who had a prominent birthmark across half her face. The 3 of us that nobody wanted. 2 more men stepped forward, and their choices were quick, almost embarrassed. Martha went to a farmer who needed help with his land. Jane was selected by a young man who looked almost as scared as she did. And then it was just me, standing alone in that pen, with the entire town of Reedridge watching. The silence was worse than the laughter had been. The silence was acknowledgement that we'd reached the punchline, and now everyone was waiting to see how it would play out. "Well," Sheriff Drummond said, and his voice had taken on that false cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. "Seems we have 1 lady remaining. Any gentleman willing to step forward?" No one moved. "Come now," Drummond continued. "Maribel is a strong woman. She could help with farm work, household chores. Any man here looking for a helpmate?" Helpmate. Not wife, not partner. Helpmate, like I was a mule. The crowd started to murmur. Someone laughed. Someone else made a comment I couldn't quite hear, but that made the people around them laugh too. "I'll pay a bonus," Drummond announced. "Any man who agrees to take Miss Bell, the town will provide a $50 settlement. That's more than fair." $50. The same amount they'd fine me for not participating. My worth had been calculated and assigned a specific value. The cost of my removal. I looked at Ma in the crowd. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the ground, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself as small as possible, like she was ashamed to be associated with me. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Broke implied it could be fixed. This was more fundamental than that. This was the final confirmation of what I'd suspected my entire life. I was unwanted, unloved, and utterly alone. "I'll do it." The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and rough as gravel. Everyone turned to look, and I saw the crowd part like the Red Sea as a man walked through. No, not walked, strode. He moved like he owned the ground he walked on, like he'd measured every person in that square and found them wanting. I'd seen him before, of course. Everyone in Reedridge knew Cole Rourke, even if most people kept their distance. He'd shown up about 3 years ago, bought a piece of land on the outskirts of town, and proceeded to make it clear that he wanted nothing to do with any of us. He came into town for supplies maybe once a month, never spoke unless spoken to, and had a reputation for being able to outwork, outshoot, and outfight any man who challenged him. He was also, I realized as he got closer, absolutely massive. Not fat. There wasn't an ounce of softness on him, but tall and broad in a way that made even the biggest men in Reedridge look small by comparison. His skin was weathered and dark from years in the sun, his hair black and shaggy like he cut it himself with a knife, his face all hard angles and old scars. And he was looking directly at me. "Mr. Rourke," Sheriff Drummond said, and there was surprise in his voice. "I didn't realize you were participating today." "I wasn't planning to," Cole said, his eyes never leaving mine. "But I changed my mind." "Well, that's excellent news. You understand the terms? You'll be taking Miss Bell as your wife, legal and binding, with the town's blessing and the $50 settlement." "Don't want your money," Cole said flatly. "Don't want your blessing either, but I'll take her." The crowd erupted again, but this time the laughter was different. It was shock mixed with disbelief, mixed with cruel amusement. Cole Rourke and Mara Bell. Can you imagine? The hermit and the heifer. Lord help them both. I felt like I was underwater, like the world had become muffled and strange. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Cole Rourke was choosing me, and I couldn't figure out if that was better or worse than being left in this pen forever. Sheriff Drummond cleared his throat. "Miss Bell, do you agree to this union?" Every eye in Reedridge was on me. Ma was looking up now, her face unreadable. Catherine Fairfax was whispering to her friends, their faces bright with malicious glee. The men who'd declined to choose me were watching with expressions ranging from relief to pity. And Cole Rourke stood there, his dark eyes steady on mine, waiting. I had two choices. Agree, or be fined and evicted and probably die in the desert within a week. "I agree," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Then it's done," Drummond announced. "Cole Rourke and Mara Bell are hereby married under the authority of Reedridge and the territory of New Mexico. Mr. Rourke, she's all yours." Cole finally broke eye contact with me and turned to face the crowd. "We done here?" he asked Drummond. "Well, there's usually a celebration, some well-wishing." "We're done," Cole said. It wasn't a question. He turned back to me and held out his hand. "You coming?" I looked at that hand, scarred, calloused, almost twice the size of my own, and tried to decide if I was walking toward salvation or just a different kind of hell. Behind me I heard Ma's voice, thin and distant. "Mara, your things?" "Don't got much," I called back without turning around. "Don't need much." I took Cole's hand. His skin was rough and warm, and his grip was careful, like he was trying not to break something fragile. He pulled me forward, helped me over the barrier that had kept me penned like an animal, and we walked through the crowd together. People moved aside for us. For him, really. I was just the unwanted cargo he'd inexplicably decided to claim. They whispered as we passed, their words following us like flies. "Never thought I'd see the day." What's he thinking? Give it a week before he regrets that decision. Cole's horse was tied up outside the saloon, a massive dun-colored stallion that looked like it could kick through a barn wall without trying. Next to it was a smaller mare, brown with white socks, already saddled. "You ride?" Cole asked, his first words directly to me. Not really. I mean, I've been on a horse before, but good enough." He released my hand and moved to the mare, checking the saddle with quick, efficient movements. "This is Bess. She's calm, won't give you trouble. Just hold on and follow my lead." He lifted me into the saddle before I could protest, his hands on my waist making it look easy even though I knew I was dead weight. I grabbed the saddle horn like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Cole mounted his own horse in one smooth motion, gathering the reins like it was second nature. He clicked his tongue, and his horse started walking. Bess followed without me having to do anything, which was good because my hands were shaking too badly to control her anyway. We rode down the main street of Reed Ridge with the entire town watching. I kept my eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at the faces I knew would be filled with pity or amusement or disgust. Refusing to see Ma one last time, to see the relief on her face that her burden had finally been passed to someone else. The town fell away behind us, the buildings getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. The landscape opened up into scrubland and red rock formations, the kind of harsh beauty that New Mexico specialized in. The sun was brutal overhead, and I could feel sweat running down my back, making the too-tight dress even more uncomfortable. We rode for what felt like hours, but was probably closer to one. Cole didn't speak, didn't look back to check on me, just kept his horse moving at a steady pace that Bess matched automatically. I focused on not falling off, on keeping my breathing steady, on not thinking about what had just happened and what it meant for whatever remained of my life. Finally, just when I thought I might actually slide off the horse from exhaustion and fear and delayed shock, Cole raised his hand and slowed his horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing. I looked where he was indicating and saw it. A ranch house, small but solid-looking, built from adobe and wood. There was a barn next to it, a corral with a few horses, what looked like a chicken coop and a small vegetable garden. It was isolated, surrounded by nothing but scrubland for miles in every direction, but it looked maintained, cared for. "This is home," Cole said. He dismounted and came over to help me down, his hands steadier than mine. When my feet hit the ground, my legs nearly buckled, and he caught me with one hand on my arm. "Easy," he said. "It's been a long day." A long day. That might have been the understatement of the century. He led the horses to the barn, and I followed because I didn't know what else to do. The barn was clean and organized, with everything in its place. Cole unsaddled both horses with quick efficiency, then turned to me. "You know how to brush down a horse?" Not really." He handed me a brush anyway. "Watch, then do. Best way to learn." I watched him work on his stallion, his movements practiced and methodical, explaining what he was doing in short, clipped sentences. Then he stepped back and let me try with Bess. I was clumsy and slow, probably doing it all wrong, but he didn't criticize. He just corrected me when necessary, his voice neutral, his hands moving mine to show me the right motion. When the horses were settled, he led me to the house. The door wasn't locked. Apparently out here, there was nobody to lock it against. Inside was simple. One main room that served as kitchen and living space, a table with 2 chairs, a fireplace, some basic furniture. 2 doors led off to other rooms. "Bedroom's there," Cole said, pointing to the left door. "I'll take the spare room for now. You hungry?" I realized I hadn't eaten since the bread and jam that morning, which felt like a lifetime ago. "Yes," I admitted. He nodded and moved to the kitchen area, pulling out bread, cheese, some dried meat. He worked in silence, and I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with myself. "Sit," he said, not looking up. "You're making the house nervous." I sat at the table, watching him move around the kitchen like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Probably had. He wasn't married, everyone in Reed Ridge knew that, but he clearly didn't need anyone to take care of him. He put a plate in front of me, then sat down across the table with his own. We ate in silence, and I kept sneaking glances at him, trying to figure out what was happening, why this stranger had chosen me, what he expected in return. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Why?" I blurted out. He looked up from his food. "Why what?" "Why did you choose me? Why did you stand up in front of the whole town, and why?" Cole put down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Because nobody else would," he said simply. The words hit me like a slap. Because nobody else would. Not because he wanted to, not because he saw something in me, because I was unwanted and he... What? Felt sorry for me? "That's not..." I started, then stopped because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. You asked, Cole said. I'm giving you an honest answer. Everyone in that town was treating you like a joke. Figured you deserved better than that. So this is charity? The anger surprised me, rising up from somewhere deep. You rescued me out of the goodness of your heart. This is practical, he corrected. I've got a ranch that needs work. You need a place to live. We both benefit. I don't know anything about ranch work. You'll learn. I'm not. I gestured at myself, at the body that had been the subject of ridicule my entire life. I'm not what you probably wanted for a wife. Cole's expression didn't change. I didn't want a wife at all. But if I'm stuck with one, might as well be someone who won't spend all day crying about it or expecting me to be something I'm not. You strike me as practical. Are you? Was I practical? I thought about it. I'd spent my whole life being dismissed and rejected, and I'd survived. I'd learned to expect nothing, which meant I was rarely disappointed. I'd learned to take care of myself because nobody else would. Yeah, I said finally. I'm practical. Good. Then we'll get along fine. He stood up and gathered the plates. You look exhausted. Get some sleep. We start fresh tomorrow. I went to the bedroom he'd indicated, half expecting it to be bare and unwelcoming, but it was actually nice. Simple, but nice. A bed with clean blankets, a small dresser, a window that looked out over the scrubland. Someone, Cole, presumably, had left a pitcher of water and a basin for washing. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself really feel it for the first time. I was married. To a stranger. In a house in the middle of nowhere. Everything I'd known, as terrible as it was gone. Ma was gone. Reedridge was gone. My old life, such as it was completely over. I should have been terrified. Maybe I was, under everything else. But what I felt most strongly was something I hadn't expected. Relief. Nobody here knew me as the town joke. Nobody here had 26 years of ridicule built up to throw in my face. Cole Rourke didn't seem to care about my size, or my appearance, or any of the things that had defined me in Reedridge. He just seemed to care about whether I could work. I could work. I'd been working my whole life, just never for anything that mattered, never toward anything that felt like it had a future. Maybe this could be different. Maybe this could be, not good, not yet, but different. And different, after 26 years of the same, felt like a gift I hadn't earned but wasn't about to refuse. I lay down on the bed, still in my too tight blue dress, too exhausted to even try to get undressed. Through the wall, I could hear Cole moving around in the other room, the quiet sounds of a man settling in for the night. My husband. Cole Rourke was my husband. The thought should have been stranger than it was, should have been frightening, but as I drifted off to sleep, what I felt was curiosity. Who was this man who'd chosen the unchosen, and what was he going to expect from me in return? I woke to the sound of someone moving around outside my window. For a second I forgot where I was, reaching for the familiar cracks in my old ceiling and finding smooth wood instead. Then it all came rushing back, the town square, the choosing, Cole Rourke's calloused hand pulling me over that barrier. The room was still dim, but I could see gray light creeping around the edges of the curtain. Early morning then. Really early. I sat up, my body protesting. The too tight dress had left marks across my ribs and waist, angry red lines that would probably bruise. I managed to wriggle out of it, leaving me in just my chemise, and dug through the small bag I hadn't even remembered Cole bringing in. It contained exactly 3 items: my other brown dress, a hairbrush with half its bristles missing, and a bar of lye soap wrapped in brown paper. Everything I owned in the world. I put on the brown dress, at least it fit properly, and tried to do something with my hair, which had come completely loose during the night, and now hung in tangles down my back. Through the window, I could see Cole in the corral, already working with one of the horses. He moved like someone who'd been awake for hours. When I finally worked up the nerve to leave the bedroom, I found the main room empty but the smell of coffee hanging in the air. A pot sat on the stove, still warm, and a tin cup waited on the table next to a plate with bread and what looked like fried eggs. I stared at the eggs. Real eggs, not the imaginary ones Ma had complained about yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, when I'd still been in Reed Ridge, still been the town joke, still been nothing. You planning to eat those or just look at them? I jumped, nearly knocking over the coffee pot. Cole stood in the doorway, his shirt already dusty despite the early hour. I didn't hear you come in. You were pretty focused on those eggs. He moved past me to pour himself coffee, his movements economical. Chickens started laying again once I fixed their coop. Got about 6 eggs yesterday. Oh. I sat down, feeling awkward. Thank you. He shrugged. Eat up. We've got work to do. The eggs were good. Better than good, actually. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had eggs that weren't watery or overcooked. Cole sat across from me with his own coffee. Not eating, just watching me in that unsettling way he had. You always stare at people while they eat? I asked, then immediately regretted it. This man had taken me in, fed me, given me a place to sleep. I had no business being sharp with him. But Cole just raised an eyebrow. Just trying to figure out if you're going to fall apart on me today, or if yesterday was the worst of it. I didn't fall apart yesterday. No, he agreed. You didn't. Most women would have. Most women weren't given much choice. Fair point. He stood up and brought his cup to the basin. Finish eating, then come out to the barn. I'll show you what needs doing. The barn was bigger than it had seemed last night, with stalls for 6 horses, though only 3 were occupied. Cole was mucking out one of the empty stalls when I arrived, pitchfork in hand, making it look easy. You ever mucked a stall before? He asked. No. Ever done any kind of farm work? I help Ma with the garden sometimes. Carried water, hung laundry. Cole leaned on his pitchfork, studying me. So no, I admitted. But I'm not afraid of work. We'll see. He handed me a second pitchfork. Watch first, then try. Same as with the horses last night. I watched him work through one stall, noting how he separated the soiled straw from the clean, where he put it, how he spread fresh straw evenly across the floor. It looked straightforward enough. It wasn't. The pitchfork was heavier than it looked. The straw was harder to lift than I expected, and within 10 minutes my shoulders were burning and my hands were developing blisters. Cole worked through 2 more stalls in the time it took me to finish one, but he didn't comment on my slowness, didn't offer to help, just kept working at his own pace. By the time we finished, my hands were raw, my back was screaming, and I was pretty sure I'd never smelled worse in my life. Not bad for a first try, Cole said, which I was pretty sure was a lie. Go wash up, there's a pump behind the house. I'll get started on the fence repairs. The water from the pump was ice cold and felt like heaven on my blistered hands. I scrubbed at the dirt and worse on my arms, wishing I could just stand there all day letting the water run over me. You might want this. I turned to find Cole holding out a jar of something yellowish and greasy looking. What is it? Salve. For your hands. He set it on the edge of the pump and walked away before I could thank him. The salve smelled terrible, like lard mixed with something medicinal, but it did help with the burning. I wrapped my hands in strips of cloth I found in the kitchen and went to find out what fence repairs entailed. Cole was at the far end of the property, near where the corral met open scrubland. Several fence posts were leaning at dangerous angles, and one section of rail had broken completely. We need to replace these 3 posts, he said without preamble. Ground's hard, so it'll take some work. You dig while I cut new posts. He handed me a shovel and pointed to the first leaning post. Dig around the base, about 2 feet down, 2 feet across. 2 feet down didn't sound like much. It was enough to make me understand that my body had limits I'd never properly tested before. The ground was like concrete, studded with rocks that the shovel hit with jarring force. My blistered hands screamed inside their cloth wrapping. Sweat ran into my eyes, making them sting. I kept digging. Cole worked nearby, using an axe to trim a fallen tree into fence posts. Every swing was precise, controlled, the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice. He didn't look over at me, didn't check my progress, just worked. So I worked too. By midday, I dug out 1 post. 1. Cole had cut 6 new posts and was starting to set them. That's enough for now, he said, appearing beside me. You pushed too hard the first day. You won't be able to move tomorrow. I can keep going. Didn't say you couldn't, said you shouldn't. He took the shovel from my hands. I tried not to wince when his fingers brushed my blisters and nodded toward the house. Go make lunch. Bread and cheese in the cold box, dried meat in the pantry. Nothing fancy. I wanted to argue, to prove I wasn't weak, wasn't useless. But my hands were shaking, my legs felt like water, and the walk back to the house took everything I had left. Lunch was simple because simple was all I could manage. I sliced bread with a knife that was probably sharp but felt dull in my clumsy, painful grip. The cheese was hard and had to be sawed into chunks. The dried meat was tough and needed soaking in water to be edible. Cole came in as I was setting the table, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his hands stained with dirt and tree sap. Good enough, he said, sitting down without washing up. He ate like he worked, efficiently, without wasted motion or time. This afternoon I need to ride out and check on the cattle. You'll stay here. Rest up. I could come with you? Could, he agreed, but you just slow me down, and you need to let those hands heal. There's mending in the basket by the fireplace if you're not too tired. Buttons need sewing, a couple of shirts need patches. Of course there was mending. Of course this stranger husband expected me to do wifely things like sewing while he did the real work. But my hands hurt too much to argue, and at least sewing was something I knew how to do. Cole left right after lunch, riding out on his big stallion without a backward glance. I watched him disappear into the scrubland, then went to find the mending basket. It was worse than I expected. Not just buttons and patches, those would have been manageable, but shirts worn so thin they were more whole than fabric, pants with seams split from hard use, socks that needed complete rehealing. This wasn't a week's worth of mending. This was months, maybe years of accumulated repairs that Cole had been ignoring. I picked up the first shirt and got to work. My hands made it difficult. The needle kept slipping, the thread wouldn't go where I wanted it, and I had to stop every few minutes to rest my cramping fingers. But I worked through the pain, falling into the rhythm of it, letting my mind wander. What was I doing here? What was this arrangement really about? Cole said it was practical, that he needed help with the ranch, and I needed a place to live. But there had to be women in Reed Ridge who knew ranch work, who could have helped him without the complication of marriage. So why me? Because nobody else would. His words from last night echoed in my head. That was the truth of it, wasn't it? I was the last choice, the only choice, the one person desperate enough that taking me didn't require pretense or romance or any of the normal rituals of courtship. We were both outcasts. Him by choice, hiding out here in the middle of nowhere. Me by circumstance, too big and too plain and too much of everything Reed Ridge didn't want. Maybe that was enough. Maybe two broken pieces could function together even if they didn't quite fit. The sun was starting to set when I heard the horse returning. I'd made progress on the mending, 3 shirts repaired, 2 pairs of pants patched, a handful of buttons reattached. My fingers were bloody from needle sticks, my eyes ached from squinting in the fading light, but I'd done something useful. Cole came in looking exhausted, his face drawn and tight. Lost a calf to coyotes, he said without greeting. Found the remains about 2 miles north. Damn things are getting bold. I'm sorry. He shrugged, moving to the water basin to wash up. Happens. Part of ranching. You get dinner started? I hadn't. I'd been so focused on the mending that I'd completely forgotten about food. I'll do it now, I said, standing up too quickly. The room tilted, and I had to grab the chair to steady myself. Cole caught my arm. When's the last time you drank water? This morning? Sit down. He pushed me back into the chair, not roughly, but firmly. You can't work all day without water, especially not in this heat. You'll make yourself sick. He brought me a cup of water and stood there watching until I drank it all, then refilled it. Drink that too. I'll handle dinner. You've been working all day. So have you. He moved to the kitchen area, pulling out ingredients with the same efficiency he applied to everything else. Besides, I'm used to it. You're not. Yet. Yet. Like he assumed I would be, eventually. Like this was temporary discomfort on the way to something else. Dinner was beans and cornbread, simple but filling. We ate in silence again, and I was starting to understand that silence was Cole's natural state. He wasn't uncomfortable with it, wasn't trying to fill the space with meaningless words. He just existed in quiet. It was different from the silence in Ma's house, which had always felt hostile, judgmental. This was just nothing, neutral, almost peaceful. "You did good work today," Cole said suddenly, startling me. The stalls, the digging, the mending, more than I expected for a first day. The compliment caught me off guard. "I'm slow." "You're learning. That's different." He pushed his empty plate away. "Tomorrow we'll work on riding. You need to be able to handle a horse on your own if you're going to be any use around here." "I thought I did okay yesterday." "On Bess." "Bess followed my horse. That's not the same as you controlling her." He stood up, gathering the dishes. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder than today." In the bedroom, I examined my hands by lamplight. The blisters had opened and bled, leaving raw patches that would definitely hurt worse tomorrow. My shoulders ached, my back was stiff, and I was pretty sure I'd be walking like an old woman when I got out of bed. But I'd survived. One day done, and I'd survived it. I lay in the darkness listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, wind through the scrubland, horses shifting in the barn, the distant yip of coyotes. Different from Reedridge's night sounds, from the voices of drunk men leaving the saloon, from Ma's disapproving sighs through the wall. Different, but not bad. The next morning started the same way, waking to the sound of Cole already working, finding coffee and food waiting, stumbling out to begin the day's lessons in survival. Writing, it turned out, was harder than it looked. Bess was patient with me, but patient didn't mean easy. Cole put me in the saddle and immediately started correcting everything. My posture, my grip on the reins, the position of my feet in the stirrups. "You're tense," he said. "Horse can feel that. Relax." I am relaxed. "You're sitting up there like you're about to be thrown. Relax your shoulders. Loosen your grip. The horse isn't going to attack you." Easy for him to say. He sat on a horse like he'd been born there, like the animal was just an extension of his own body. I sat on Bess like a sack of flour someone had balanced precariously on top. "Here." He moved closer, his hand on my knee, adjusting the angle. "Weight in your heels, not your toes. Feel the difference?" I did, actually. It was more stable, less like I was going to slide off at any moment. "Good. Now we're going to walk. Just a slow circle around the corral. Let Bess set the pace." The circle was terrifying. Every step the horse took felt like I might fall, might embarrass myself, might prove that I really was as useless as Reedridge had always said. But I didn't fall. Bess walked her patient circle, and I stayed on, and by the third rotation something started to click. "Better," Cole said. "You're getting it. Want to try a trot?" "No." "Good instinct. Let's do it anyway." The trot was worse than the walk, bouncing me around until my teeth rattled and my grip on the saddle horn turned white-knuckled. But I didn't fall. Didn't scream, just held on and let Bess carry me through it. When Cole finally told me to stop, I slid off the horse feeling like I'd been beaten with a stick. Everything hurt in new and creative ways. "Not bad," Cole said, taking Bess's reins. "You'll be sore tomorrow, but you stayed on. That's what matters." The days started to blur together after that. Mornings began before sunrise, working until my body screamed for rest, learning tasks I'd never imagined I'd need to know. Cole taught me to milk the cow we apparently owned but that I'd never noticed, to collect eggs without spooking the chickens, to tell the difference between a fence that needed minor repair and one that needed complete replacement. He wasn't patient in the traditional sense, didn't coddle me or pretend things were easier than they were, but he was consistent. When I failed at something, he showed me again. When I succeeded, he moved on to the next task without fanfare. After a week, my hands had developed calluses instead of blisters. After 2 weeks, I could trot on Bess without feeling like I was going to die. After 3 weeks, I could muck out all the stalls in the time it took Cole to do morning feeding. We fell into a routine. Work, eat, sleep. Not much talking beyond what was necessary for the tasks at hand. But something was shifting, so gradually I almost didn't notice it happening. Cole started leaving small things for me. A better pair of work gloves that actually fit, a hat to keep the sun off my face, a cushion for the chair I used for mending. Nothing extravagant, nothing that required acknowledgement, just thoughtfulness. And I started doing things for him in return. Learning how he liked his coffee, fixing meals that were a little more elaborate than beans and cornbread, mending his clothes before they got to the point of falling apart. We were becoming something. Not quite friends, not quite partners, but not strangers anymore either. One evening, about a month after the day in the town square, Cole came in from checking the perimeter fence looking troubled. "We need to go to town tomorrow," he said. My stomach dropped. "Reedridge?" "Unfortunately. Need supplies I can't do without. Wire for the fence, nails, couple other things. Plus, I've got beef to sell." He sat down heavily. "You don't have to come if you don't want to." "Will people talk if I don't?" "People will talk regardless." He looked at me directly. "But yeah, they'll talk more if you stay here. Say I'm ashamed of you or some such nonsense." "Are you? Ashamed of me?" The question hung in the air between us. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "No," he said simply. "You work hard. You learn fast. You don't complain. Why would I be ashamed of that?" "Because I'm not," I gestured at myself, at the body that had been the source of shame for 26 years. "You know what I mean." "I know what you think I mean, but you're wrong." He stood up, moving to look out the window at the darkening scrubland. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who dug fence post holes until her hands bled and didn't quit. Someone who got bucked off a horse twice and got right back on. Someone who's never once asked me for something she couldn't earn herself." He turned back to face me. "So no, Mara. I'm not ashamed of you, not even a little bit." My throat felt tight. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. Nobody had ever seen me as anything but a burden. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll come to town with you." "You sure?" "No, but I'll come anyway." Cole nodded, something that might have been respect crossing his face. "We'll leave at first light. Get some rest." That night, I lay awake wondering what tomorrow would bring. Would Reedridge still see me as the joke, the outcast, the girl nobody wanted? Or had something changed out here in the scrubland? Something fundamental that would be visible to everyone else? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The ride into Reedridge felt longer than it had the day Cole took me away. Maybe because this time I knew what waited at the end of it. The stares, the whispers, the barely concealed laughter that had been the soundtrack of my entire life. Cole rode ahead on his stallion, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies and 3 head of cattle he planned to sell. I followed on Bess, my hands steady on the reins in a way they hadn't been a month ago, my seat in the saddle more confident, even if my stomach was churning. "You're quiet," Cole said without turning around. "Just thinking." "About?" "About whether anyone in that town has anything better to do than gossip about people who don't want their attention." Cole made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Probably not. Small towns are like that. Everyone else's business is more interesting than their own. You ever regret it? Choosing me in front of all of them?" This time he did turn, pulling his horse to a stop, so I had to stop too. His dark eyes studied my face like he was looking for something specific. "You asking because you regret it?" "I asked you first." "No," he said. "I don't regret it. You've proved useful, proved you can work, proved you're not going to fall apart every time things get hard. That's more than I can say for most people." He paused. "Your turn. Did I regret it?" A month ago, I'd been living in a cramped house with a mother who could barely stand to look at me, working jobs that paid almost nothing, knowing I'd never be anything more than Reedridge's favorite punchline. Now I had blisters turned to calluses, muscles that ached from real work, and a husband who treated me like a person instead of a problem. "No," I said. "I don't regret it either." Cole nodded like that settled something and turned his horse back toward town. We rode the rest of the way in silence, but it felt different now, less heavy. The first person who saw us was Tommy Bracken, Tom Bracken's youngest son, playing in the dirt outside the stable. His eyes went wide when he spotted us, and he went running inside yelling, "Pa! Pa! Cole Rourke's back, and he's got Mara Bell with him." Cole dismounted and started unloading the pack horse like nothing had happened, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. He was expecting trouble. By the time we'd secured the horses, a small crowd had gathered. Not the whole town like last time, but enough people to make my skin prickle. I recognized Mrs. Palmer from the boarding house, Mr. Henderson from the general store, and several others whose names I'd never bothered to learn because they'd never bothered to see me as worth knowing. "Well, well," Mrs. Palmer said, her voice carrying that false sweetness that meant she was about to say something cruel. "Look who decided to show her face. We were starting to think Cole had hidden you away permanently." "Been busy," Cole said flatly, not looking up from tying off the cattle. "Ranch work doesn't stop just because people want to gossip." Of course, of course." Mrs. Palmer's eyes raked over me, taking in my work-worn dress, my sun-darkened skin, the hat Cole had given me to keep off the worst of the heat. "My, you look different, Mara. Almost didn't recognize you." I bit back the response that wanted to come out. Something sharp about how maybe that was because she'd never really looked at me before, and just nodded. "Ranch work agrees with me, I suppose." "How nice." The way she said it made it clear she thought it was anything but nice. "And how is married life treating you? Cole taking good care of you?" Before I could answer, Cole straightened up and fixed Mrs. Palmer with a look that could have frozen water in July. "My wife and I are here on business, not to satisfy your curiosity about our private affairs. If you don't mind?" Mrs. Palmer actually took a step back. "Well, no need to be rude about it." "Wasn't being rude, just being clear." Cole turned to me. "Come on, we need to get to the Mercantile before Henderson closes for lunch." The Mercantile was exactly as I remembered it. Shelves packed with supplies, the smell of dried goods and leather, Mr. Henderson behind the counter with his perpetual expression of mild disapproval. He looked up when we entered, and I watched his face cycle through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been disappointment that we were still together. "Cole," he said carefully. "Mara, what can I do for you?" Cole pulled out a list from his pocket, handwritten in his blocky script. "Need these supplies. Also looking to sell 3 head of cattle, all in good condition. You still buying?" Henderson took the list, his eyes scanning it while his mouth pursed. "This is quite a lot. You planning to build something out there? Planning to fix what needs fixing and maintain what doesn't. That a problem?" "No, no problem. Just making conversation." He set the list down. "This is going to run you about $40, give or take. The cattle, I can offer you $60 for all 3. Cattle are worth $75 minimum, and you know it. Market's been slow and market's been fine. You trying to cheat me because you think I'm desperate or because you disapprove of my choice in wives?" The Mercantile went dead silent. 2 other customers who'd been browsing suddenly became very interested in examining jars of preserves. Henderson's face turned red. "Now see here, I don't appreciate being lowballed on good livestock. 75. Or I take them to the buyer in Santa Rosa. Your choice." They stared at each other for a long moment, and I realized I was holding my breath. Finally, Henderson nodded stiffly. "Fine. 75. Good. Mara, help me load this." We spent the next 20 minutes gathering supplies. Nails, wire, flour, sugar, coffee, a few other staples. I moved through the store trying to make myself invisible, but I could feel Henderson watching me, could feel the stares of the other customers. "Mara Bell," one of them said suddenly. I turned to find Catherine Fairfax standing near the fabric section, her perfect blonde curls arranged just so, her dress probably worth more than Cole's entire supply list. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look so rustic." Rustic. Another word that meant something else, something worse. "Been working," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I can tell. Your skin is absolutely ruined from the sun, and your hands—" She reached out like she was going to touch them, then pulled back with exaggerated horror. "Are those calluses?" "They are." How dreadful. Richard would never allow me to do work that would ruin my hands like that. Richard Sutton, her husband, the wealthy rancher who'd chosen her during the selection. Of course she'd married well. Catherine always did. "Different ranches, different needs," I said, turning back to the supplies I was gathering. "I suppose so." Catherine moved closer, lowering her voice like we were confidants instead of lifelong enemies. "Though I have to say, everyone's been wondering how long it would last. You and Cole Rourke. We all thought he'd realize his mistake within a week. Something hot and sharp flared in my chest. Sorry to disappoint you. Oh, I'm not disappointed. Just concerned. For you, I mean. Living all the way out there with a man nobody really knows. Doing work you're clearly not suited for. It must be so lonely. It's not. Really? Catherine's eyebrows rose in perfectly practiced surprise. Because Richard says Cole Rourke barely speaks to anyone, barely comes to town. Seems like a terribly isolated existence for someone like you. Someone like me. Always someone like me. Someone different. Someone less. Cole treats me fine, I said, my voice harder than I intended. Better than fine, actually. So you can tell Richard and everyone else who's been wondering that we're doing just fine out there. If you say so. Catherine smiled that smile I'd learned to hate years ago. Though do try to take care of your skin, Mara. Sun damage ages you so terribly, and you're already... She stopped, letting the unfinished sentence hang there like a knife. Already what? Already plain? Already old? Already everything Reedridge had decided I was before I even had a chance to be anything else? Catherine. Cole's voice cut through the moment like an axe through wood. I hadn't heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, standing close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. We done here? Catherine's smile wavered. Cole. I was just catching up with Mara. No, you were being cruel for entertainment. There's a difference. He looked at her with those flat, dark eyes that gave away nothing. We done? Yes, of course. She gathered her skirts and moved away, but not before shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. Cole watched her go, then turned to me. You all right? Fine. That didn't sound fine. I said I'm fine. I picked up a bag of flour with more force than necessary, trying to ignore the way my hands were shaking. Let's just finish and get out of here. We loaded everything onto the pack horse in tense silence. I could feel the town watching us, could hear the whispers starting up like wasps buzzing around a nest. Cole worked with his usual efficiency, his face showing nothing, but I caught him glancing at me every few minutes like he was checking to make sure I hadn't shattered. We were almost ready to leave when Ma appeared. I saw her coming down the street, her thin frame wrapped in a shawl despite the heat, her face pinched with that expression I knew so well. Worry mixed with disapproval, like she couldn't decide if she was concerned for me or ashamed of me. Probably both. Mara, she said, stopping a few feet away like I might be contagious. I didn't know you'd be in town today. Didn't know I needed permission. She flinched. That's not what I meant. I wanted to see how you were. If you were... She trailed off, her eyes flicking to Cole and then away. If you were managing. I'm managing fine. You look different. So I've been told. Ma's hands twisted in her shawl. Your hair's coming loose, and that dress, it's not... You should take better care of yourself. What will people think? What would people think? The question that had ruled my entire life up until a month ago. I don't care what people think, I said, and realized it was true. I've got work to do, Ma. Real work. I don't have time to worry about whether my hair's perfect or my dress is fancy enough. But you represent him now. She nodded toward Cole. You're his wife. She should do what exactly? Cole's voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. Tell me, Mrs. Bell, what exactly should my wife be doing differently? Ma's mouth opened and closed. I didn't mean... I'm just concerned for her welfare. Her welfare is fine. She's fed, clothed, housed, and treated with respect, which is more than I can say for how she was treated here. Cole finished securing the last of the supplies and turned to face Ma directly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a long ride home. Home, Ma repeated, and something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or regret. Yes, I suppose you do. Cole mounted his stallion and waited for me to get settled on Bess. I looked down at Ma one last time. This woman who'd given birth to me but never quite managed to accept me, who'd spent 26 years wishing I was different, smaller, prettier, anything but what I was. Goodbye, Ma, I said. Will you come visit sometime? Maybe, if I have time. I gathered Bess's reins. Ranch work keeps me busy. We rode out of Reedridge with the whole town watching. I could feel their eyes on my back, could imagine the conversations that would start the moment we were out of earshot. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them whisper and speculate and judge. I had calluses on my hands and dirt under my nails, and a husband who'd just defended me to my own mother. I had more than I'd ever had before. We were a mile out of town when Cole finally spoke. You want to talk about it? About what? About whatever Catherine Fairfax said that made you look like you wanted to hit her. About your mother. About any of it. Did I want to talk about it? Part of me did. The part that had spent years keeping everything locked down because nobody cared to listen. But the words felt stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. They all think you made a mistake, I said finally. Choosing me. They're waiting for you to realize it and send me back. And what do you think? I took a breath. I think I'm tired of caring what they think. Cole made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. Good. That's real good, Mara. We rode in silence for a while, the scrubland stretching out around us, red rocks glowing in the afternoon sun. It was harsh country, unforgiving and beautiful in equal measure. A month ago, I would have found it lonely. Now it felt like freedom. Catherine was right about one thing, I said. My skin is getting dark from the sun, and my hands are rough. And I probably do look different than I did before. So I just thought you should know, in case it bothers you. Cole pulled his horse to a stop and turned to look at me. Really look at me. His expression more open than I'd ever seen it. You want to know what bothers me? He asked. People who do nothing useful but spend all their time judging people who do. Women like Catherine Fairfax who've never worked a day in their lives, acting superior to women who keep things running. Towns that measure worth by appearance instead of character. He paused. You know what doesn't bother me? Sun-dark skin from honest work. Calloused hands that can handle a horse or mend a fence or a dozen other things that need doing. Hair that comes loose because you've been too busy being useful to fuss with pins and ribbons. My throat felt tight again. You're saying you don't care that I look like a ranch hand instead of a lady? I'm saying you look like someone who works for what they have, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard, someone who's stronger than they think they are. He turned his horse back toward home. That's worth more than perfect curls and clean hands. We didn't talk much the rest of the way back, but it was a comfortable silence this time, the kind that didn't need filling. When we reached the ranch, Cole started unloading supplies while I took care of the horses. It had become our routine. He handled the heavy lifting, I handled the animals. Not because I couldn't lift heavy things, but because I'd gotten good with the horses, and Cole had noticed and adjusted accordingly. That was the thing about him that kept surprising me. He paid attention. Not in an obvious way, not with big gestures or flowery words, but he noticed when I was better at something, when I struggled with something else, and he adapted. He let me fail when failure was part of learning, and he stepped in when failure would just be discouraging. He was teaching me without making it feel like teaching, making me stronger without making me feel weak for needing to become stronger. You hungry? He called from the house. Starving. Good. I'm making stew. Cole's stew was basic. Beef, potatoes, carrots, onions, nothing fancy. But it was hot and filling, and we'd both worked hard enough that it tasted better than anything I'd eaten in Reedridge. We ate at the table, the lamp casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the scrubland in shades of orange and red. Thank you, I said suddenly. For what you said to Catherine and to my mother. You didn't have to do that. Cole set down his spoon. Yeah, I did. You're my wife. People disrespect you. They disrespect me. I don't tolerate that. Is that the only reason? He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on his bowl. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. No, that's not the only reason. What's the other reason? Because what they were saying wasn't true. You're not a mistake. You're not a burden. You're not any of the things they've spent years making you believe you are. He looked up at me. And I'm tired of watching people try to convince you otherwise. Something shifted in my chest, something I didn't have words for. I'd spent my whole life being told I was too much, too big, too plain, too everything wrong. And here was this man, this stranger who'd become my husband, saying the opposite like it was obvious. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Don't say anything, just believe it. He stood up and gathered the dishes. You've earned that much. Later, lying in bed and listening to the sounds of the ranch at night, I thought about what he'd said, about earning belief in myself, about being worth more than Reedridge had ever allowed me to be. A month ago, I'd been chosen because nobody else would choose me, but somewhere in the work and the silence and the small kindnesses, something had changed. Cole had chosen me again every day, in the way he taught me things, in the way he defended me, in the way he saw me. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to choose myself too. The next few weeks fell into the same rhythm: work, eat, sleep. But there was something different now, something that had shifted during that trip to Reedridge. Cole talked more. Not long conversations, but small observations, questions about how I was managing with tasks, suggestions for easier ways to do things. And I found myself talking back, sharing thoughts I'd normally keep locked away, asking questions about the ranch and his plans for it. One evening, about 2 weeks after the trip to town, Cole came in from checking the north fence line, looking thoughtful. Got an idea? He said, sitting down across from me at the table where I was mending yet another shirt. But I want your opinion first. My opinion? You're the one who asked to live here too. Seems fair you should have a say. He leaned back in his chair. I've been thinking about expanding the chicken coop, maybe getting more laying hens. We could sell eggs in town, bring in some extra income, but it would mean more work, more feeding and cleaning and collecting. I can handle it. I know you can. Question is whether you want to. This is your choice, not an order. I thought about it. More chickens meant more eggs, which meant more food and more money. It also meant more responsibility, but I'd proven I could handle responsibility. I think it's a good idea, I said, but we should build the coop bigger than we need right now. Room to expand if it works out. Cole smiled, actually smiled, and I realized I'd never seen him do that before. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, less harsh. Smart thinking, he said. We'll start on it this weekend. Building the chicken coop became our project. Cole handled the heavy construction, but I helped with planning, with measuring, with holding boards in place while he nailed them together. We worked side by side in the late afternoon heat, and for the first time since I'd arrived at the ranch, I felt like a partner instead of just a worker. Hand me that hammer, Cole said, and I did. How's this angle? I asked, and he checked it. Perfect. Hold it steady. We built something together, not just a chicken coop, but trust, understanding, something that felt almost like friendship. When we finished 3 days later, we stood back and looked at our work. A sturdy structure twice the size of the original coop, with proper nesting boxes and a secure run. Not bad, Cole said. It's better than not bad. It's good. He looked at me sideways, that small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. You're right. It is good. We make a decent team. We. Team. Words I'd never expected to hear applied to me and anyone else. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to that moment, to the way Cole had said we, like it was natural, like we were actually in this together. I got up and went to the main room for water, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake him. But the lamp was still on in his room, light showing under the door. I hesitated, then knocked softly. Cole? You awake? Yeah. Come in. He was sitting on his bed, shirtless, examining what looked like an old wound on his shoulder, a nasty scar that curved from his collarbone down toward his chest. Sorry, I said, starting to back out. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not. Just checking this old injury. Acts up sometimes. He rolled his shoulder, wincing. What's wrong? Can't sleep? No, I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. I wanted to ask you something. Ask. Why did you really choose me? And don't say it's because nobody else would. There's more to it than that. There has to be. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on that old scar. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, more raw. You want the truth? Yes. I chose you because you looked like I felt. He glanced up at me. Standing there in that pen, with everyone treating you like you were worthless. I know what that's like, being judged, being dismissed, being told you don't matter. His hand moved to the scar. I got this fighting in a war nobody remembers, for a country that decided I wasn't worth taking care of afterward. Came out here to get away from all of it, and then that damn sheriff tried to drag me into his scheme. You could have said no. I did say no, for about 2 seconds. Then I saw you standing there alone, and I saw your face, and He shook his head. I saw myself. Saw what it looks like when the world decides you're not good enough. And I thought, maybe we could both prove them wrong. My eyes were burning. I blinked hard against the tears that wanted to come. Have we? I asked. Proved them wrong? Cole stood up and crossed the small space between us. He was close enough that I had to tilt my head back to look at him, close enough that I could see the faded scars on his chest, the silver threading through his dark hair. I don't know about them, he said quietly. But you've proved me right. About you being stronger than you knew. About you being worth choosing. Cole? I'm not good with words, Mara. I'm better with actions. So I'm telling you now straight out, this isn't charity. This isn't me doing you a favor. You've earned your place here. You've more than earned it. I didn't think about it, didn't plan it. I just stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him, pressing my face against his chest and holding on like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. For a second, he froze. Then his arms came around me, careful at first, then tighter, his chin resting on top of my head. We stood like that for a long time, just holding each other in the lamplight, two broken pieces that had somehow found a way to fit together. When I finally pulled back, Cole's expression was unreadable. Thank you, I said, for seeing me, for choosing me, for all of it. Thank you for staying, he replied, for not running when you had the chance, for making this place feel less empty. I went back to my room but didn't sleep for hours, too full of feelings I didn't have names for, too aware that something fundamental had shifted between us tonight. We'd started as strangers forced together by circumstance. We'd become partners in survival, in work, in building something from nothing. But maybe, just maybe, we were becoming something more. The morning after felt different. Not awkward exactly, but charged with something neither of us knew how to name. Cole was already in the kitchen when I emerged, same as always. But when he handed me my coffee, his fingers brushed mine and lingered a second longer than necessary. Sleep well? He asked. Eventually. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. You? Same. He turned back to the stove where eggs were frying. I've been thinking. About? About what I said last night. About us proving people wrong. He flipped the eggs with practiced efficiency. I think we need to go back to Reedridge. My stomach dropped. Why? Because hiding out here makes it look like we've got something to be ashamed of. Like they were right about us being a mistake. He slid eggs onto 2 plates. I don't want them thinking that. What do you want them thinking? Cole set a plate in front of me and sat down across the table. I want them thinking we're exactly what we are. 2 people who made a choice and made it work. I want them to see you standing tall instead of shrinking. I want them to know that what they think doesn't matter anymore. And how exactly do we do that? There's a harvest dance next Saturday. Big town event. Everyone goes. We're going to go too. I nearly choked on my coffee. A dance? Cole, I don't dance. I've never danced. And showing up there would be like walking into a lion's den covered in raw meat. So we'll bring a big stick. He took a bite of eggs, chewing thoughtfully. Look, I know it's not going to be easy, but you can't spend the rest of your life avoiding that town because they were cruel to you. You're not the same person who left there 2 months ago. That doesn't mean they're going to see me differently. No. But it means you're going to see yourself differently, and that's what matters. He reached across the table, his rough hand covering mine. I'll be right there with you every minute. If you want to leave, we leave. But I think you need to do this. I think you need to show them who you've become. I looked down at our hands, his scarred and calloused, mine matching now, both of them marked by work and survival. 2 months ago, the thought of walking into a town dance would have terrified me. Hell, it still terrified me. But he was right about one thing. I wasn't the same person anymore. All right, I said. We'll go to the dance. Cole squeezed my hand. That's my girl. My girl. The words sent warmth flooding through my chest, settling somewhere around my heart. The week leading up to the dance passed in a blur of normal ranch work, mixed with unusual preparations. Cole rode into town midweek and came back with a package wrapped in brown paper, which he handed to me without ceremony. What's this? Open it. Inside was fabric, not fancy lace and ribbons like Catherine Fairfax would wear, but good quality cotton in a deep green color that reminded me of pine trees, and underneath it, a simpler dress in dark blue, more practical, but still nicer than anything I owned. Cole, this is too much. It's not too much. You need something decent to wear, and I'm not having you show up in a work dress with patches. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. There's a woman in town, Mrs. Chen, runs a seamstress shop. She's expecting you tomorrow to do the fitting. You already arranged it? Figured you'd argue if I asked first. He met my eyes. I want them to see you looking like you deserve to be seen. Not because you need fancy clothes, but because you should have the choice. You've never had the choice before. He was right. Every dress I'd ever owned had been either hand-me-downs from Ma or cheap fabric I'd sewn myself late at night. Nobody had ever bought me something new, something chosen just for me. Thank you, I said quietly. Really, thank you. The next day, Cole rode with me to town. Mrs. Chen's shop was on the edge of the main street, a small building I'd passed 100 times without ever going inside. Mrs. Chen herself was a tiny woman with sharp eyes and quick hands who looked me over with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent decades measuring people. So you're the one Cole asked me about, she said, her accent thick but her English clear. He said you needed a dress for the harvest dance. He's very forward-thinking. Mrs. Chen laughed, a sharp bark of sound. That man doesn't think forward or backward. He just acts. Now strip down to your chemise. I need to measure you properly. I glanced at Cole, who was already heading for the door. I'll be at the Mercantile, he said. Take your time, Mrs. Chen worked in efficient silence, her measuring tape snapping around various parts of my body while she muttered numbers under her breath and made marks in a small notebook. You've lost weight, she observed. Have I? Oh, yes. Not much, but enough. Here and here. She tapped my waist and arms. Ranch work does that. Burns off the soft parts, leaves the strong parts. She stepped back, studying me. You carry yourself different, too. Shoulders back, head up, that's new. I suppose it is. Good. Good changes. She picked up the green fabric. This color will look nice on you, brings out your eyes. Not that anyone in this town ever looked at your eyes before. The bluntness startled me. You knew about how they treated me? Everyone knew. This town is small and cruel in equal measure. Mrs. Chen started pinning fabric. But people only have power over you if you give it to them. You stopped giving it to them. That makes them nervous. Why would that make them nervous? Because if you can change, maybe they have to change too. Maybe they have to admit they were wrong about you. People hate admitting they're wrong. She made a few more pins. Stand still. I need to check the hem. When the fitting was done, Mrs. Chen promised the dresses would be ready by Friday. Cole was waiting outside, leaning against the hitching post with that relaxed stillness he had. How'd it go? She's very direct. That's why I like her. No games, no pretending. He pushed off from the post. You hungry? There's a restaurant down the street. Nothing fancy, but the food's decent. We'd never eaten in public together. Never sat across from each other in a place where everyone could see us, could judge us, could whisper about the odd couple who shouldn't work but somehow did. Let's do it, I said. The restaurant was half full, and every head turned when we walked in. I felt the familiar prickle of attention, but this time Cole's hand was on the small of my back, steady and warm, and somehow that made it bearable. We took a table by the window. The waitress who came over was young, maybe 19, and she stared at me with open curiosity. What can I get you folks? She asked. Cole ordered for both of us, steak, potatoes, vegetables. Simple food, but more than I usually ate in a whole day back when I lived with Ma. Everyone's staring, I murmured after the waitress left. Let them stare, we're not doing anything wrong. Cole leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. You get used to it after a while. People stare at things they don't understand. And we're something they don't understand? We're something they didn't think was possible. That's worse than not understanding. That's being proven wrong. He smiled slightly. Like Mrs. Chen said, people hate that. The food came, and we ate while the restaurant buzzed with poorly concealed whispers. I caught fragments. Can you believe? Still together. She looks different. Wonder how long it'll last. Cole ignored all of it, focused on his meal like we were the only two people in the room. You're good at that, I said. At what? Not caring what people think. Had a lot of practice. When you've been to war, seen what I've seen, small-town gossip stops mattering pretty quick. He cut another piece of steak. Besides, the only opinion that matters is yours. Mine? You're the one I have to live with. You're the one who sees me every day, works beside me, knows what I'm actually like instead of what people assume. He looked up at me. So yeah, your opinion matters, theirs doesn't. Something in my chest expanded, warm and bright. This man who barely spoke, who hid away from the world, was telling me I mattered, that my opinion of him was the only one worth having. For what it's worth, I said softly, I think you're a good man. Better than you probably think you are. Cole's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face before he locked it down. That works out well then, since I think you're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. We finished our meal in comfortable silence, paid, and walked back to the horses. As we were about to mount up, I heard a familiar voice. Mara? I turned to find Sarah Miller standing a few feet away, her face uncertain. Sarah, who'd been chosen by Marcus Webb, who I'd watched agree to marry a drunk with one hand and a mean streak. Sarah, how are you? I'm managing. She glanced around nervously, like she was afraid of being caught talking to me. I heard you were in town. I wanted to see if you were okay. I'm fine, better than fine, actually. Sarah's eyes flicked to Cole, then back to me. Does he treat you well? Better than I deserve, better than I ever expected. That's good. That's really good. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I'm glad one of us got lucky. My heart sank. Marcus isn't treating you well? He's not hitting me, if that's what you're asking, but he drinks most of what he earns, and when he drinks, he gets mean with his words, tells me I'm useless, that I can't do anything right, that he should have chosen someone else. She wrapped her arms around herself. I just wanted you to know that I'm happy for you, that you found something good. Before I could respond, Cole stepped forward. Mrs. Webb, if you ever need help, if things get worse, you come to our ranch. You understand? Don't wait until it's too late. Sarah's eyes widened. I couldn't possibly. Yes, you could, and you will, if you need to. His voice left no room for argument. A woman shouldn't have to live with cruelty just because some sheriff decided she had to get married. Sarah looked like she might cry. Thank you, both of you. We rode home in heavy silence. Cole's jaw was tight, his hands gripping the reins harder than necessary. You meant that, I said finally. About Sarah coming to the ranch if she needs help. Of course I meant it. You think I'd say something like that if I didn't? No, but taking in someone else's wife, that could cause trouble. Let it cause trouble. I'm not going to stand by while a woman gets destroyed by a man who should never have been allowed within 10 feet of her. He glanced at me. You disagree? No, I'm not used to people doing the right thing when it's hard. Then you've been around the wrong people. He kicked his horse into a faster pace. Come on, we've got work to do before the dance. Friday came faster than I expected. Cole rode into town alone to pick up the dresses while I finished the afternoon chores. When he returned, he handed me the wrapped package with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mrs. Chen said to tell you she added something extra. Wouldn't say what. I opened the package in my bedroom. The green dress was beautiful, simple but well made, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that would move nicely. The blue dress was more practical, something I could wear to town on regular days. And underneath both, wrapped in tissue paper, was a third item, a pair of dancing slippers in soft leather, clearly new. There was a note in Mrs. Chen's precise handwriting. Every woman deserves to dance in proper shoes at least once. Don't argue. Just wear them. Chen. I sat on the bed holding those slippers, something breaking open inside me. These people, Cole, Mrs. Chen, even Sarah in her own struggling way, they saw me as worth something, worth investing in, worth caring about. I'd spent so long believing I was worthless that I'd forgotten it was a choice. Reedridge had chosen to see me as a joke, and I'd chosen to believe them. But I didn't have to believe them anymore. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably good weather, clear sky, moderate temperature, no dust storms on the horizon. Cole was more restless than usual, checking the horses twice, oiling his saddle unnecessarily, finding tasks that didn't need doing. "You're nervous," I observed. "I'm not nervous." "You've checked that saddle 3 times. You're nervous." He stopped and turned to face me. "Maybe I am. This is important. I want it to go well. It's just a dance, it's not just a dance. It's you walking back into that town after they tried to destroy you. It's you showing them they failed." He crossed his arms. "That matters." "Why does it matter to you so much?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "Because someone should have done it for me. After the war, after everything fell apart, someone should have stood up and said I still mattered. Nobody did. I don't want that for you." I walked over to him and put my hand on his arm. "You matter, to me. You know that, right?" He looked down at my hand, then up at my face. "Yeah, I'm starting to." We left for town mid-afternoon. I wore the green dress, my hair pulled back in a simple style I'd managed myself, the dancing slippers hidden under my skirts. Cole had put on his good shirt, still plain, still practical, but clean and pressed. We looked like what we were, working people dressed up for a special occasion. The harvest dance was held in the town hall, a large wooden building that usually served as a meeting place, but had been decorated with fall leaves and colored ribbons for the occasion. Music drifted out into the street, a fiddle, a guitar, someone on a makeshift drum. Cole helped me down from Bess, his hand steady on my waist. "You ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." We walked in together, and the room fell silent. It was the selection all over again, every eye turning, every conversation stopping, everyone staring at the spectacle we'd become. But this time was different. This time I wasn't alone in a pen, wasn't standing there waiting to be chosen or rejected. This time Cole was beside me, his hand finding mine and holding tight. Sheriff Drummond was the first to approach, his face carefully neutral. "Cole? Mrs. Rourke. Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Cole said flatly. "Well, help yourselves to refreshments. Dancing starts in a few minutes." Drummond moved away and the room slowly started breathing again, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Catherine Fairfax was there, of course, dressed in an elaborate yellow gown that probably cost more than Cole's entire ranch. She stood with a cluster of women, all of them looking over at us and whispering behind their hands. "Want to leave?" Cole murmured. "No. I want some of that punch." We made our way to the refreshment table, and I could feel the attention following us like a physical weight. Mrs. Palmer was serving punch, and her hand shook slightly as she filled my cup. "Mara, how nice to see you." "Mrs. Palmer." I took the cup and sipped it. Too sweet, but drinkable. "Thank you. That's a lovely dress. New?" "It is." "Well, it's very becoming." She looked like she wanted to say more, but Cole's presence beside me seemed to rob her of the courage. The music started up again, couples moving onto the dance floor. Cole turned to me, his expression serious. "I should probably tell you something." "What?" "I don't actually know how to dance." I stared at him. "You brought me to a dance, made a big speech about showing them who we are, and you don't know how to dance?" "I know, but I figure we can learn together." He held out his hand. "What do you say?" "What did I say?" I said yes. I took his hand and let him lead me onto the dance floor, aware of every eye on us, every whisper, every judgment. Cole pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. "Just follow my lead," he said. "You don't know how to lead. Then we'll figure it out together." We moved clumsily at first, out of step with the music and each other, two people who'd never danced trying to find a rhythm that worked. I stepped on his feet. He went the wrong direction. We bumped into another couple and had to apologize, but we didn't stop. We kept moving, kept trying, and slowly something started to click. Not perfect coordination, we were too rough around the edges for that, but something real, something honest. Cole pulled me closer, and I let him, my hand on his shoulder, his arm solid around my waist. We moved together across the floor, and I realized something. We weren't dancing for them anymore. We were dancing for us. The song ended, and another began. We kept dancing. Other couples gave us space, some watching with curiosity, others with something that might have been respect. The music swirled around us, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. "You're smiling," Cole said softly. "I am?" "Yeah, it's nice. You should do it more often." "Maybe I will." We danced through 3 more songs before taking a break. My feet hurt. The new slippers weren't quite broken in, but it was a good hurt, an earned hurt. Catherine Fairfax materialized beside us as we were getting more punch. "Well, Mara, I have to say, I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Why not? It's a public dance." "Yes, but after everything, well, I thought you might be too embarrassed to show your face." Her smile was sharp as a knife. "Though I suppose when you've already been humiliated in front of the whole town, what's a little more?" Cole's hand tightened on his cup, but I spoke before he could. "You know what, Catherine? I'm not embarrassed. Not anymore. I've spent 2 months working harder than you've probably worked in your entire life. I've learned skills you'll never need because you've never had to do anything for yourself. And I've found something you'll probably never have." "Oh? And what's that?" "Someone who chose me because he wanted to, not because I came with money or a pretty face or social connections. Someone who sees me as I actually am and likes what he sees." I looked her dead in the eye. "Can you say the same about Richard?" Catherine's face went white, then red. "How dare you?" "I dare because I don't care what you think anymore. You spent years making me feel worthless, and I let you. But I'm done letting you or anyone else in this town tell me what I'm worth." I set down my cup. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to dance with my husband." I walked away before she could respond, my heart pounding, but my head high. Cole followed, catching up to me at the edge of the dance floor. "That was something," he said. "Too much?" "Not even close. That was perfect." He pulled me back into his arms as a slow song started. "I'm proud of you." "For standing up to Catherine Fairfax?" "For standing up for yourself. That's harder." We swayed to the music, and I let myself relax against him, feeling his strength, his steadiness, his solid presence. People were still watching, still whispering, but it didn't matter anymore. They could think what they wanted. I knew the truth. The truth was that I'd been chosen. Not as a last resort, not out of pity, but because someone had seen in me what I was just beginning to see in myself: strength, resilience, worth. The truth was that I'd chosen too. I'd chosen to stay, to work, to try, to become someone new, while somehow becoming more myself than I'd ever been. The truth was that we'd built something together, Cole and I. Something real and solid and ours. The song ended, and Cole stepped back, his eyes on mine. "You want to stay or head home?" I looked around the room, at the people who'd spent years making me feel small, at the town that had never had space for someone like me, at all of it. "Let's go home," I said. We walked out of that dance with our heads high and our hands linked, and I swear I could feel something shift in the air behind us. We'd come to prove a point, to show them we weren't ashamed. But somewhere in the music and the movement and the moment, we'd proven something to ourselves instead. We were more than what they'd tried to make us. We were more than the sum of our broken parts. We were whole. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, comfortable, the kind of silence that comes from understanding without needing words. When we arrived, Cole helped me down from Bess, and this time his hands lingered on my waist, his eyes searching my face. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being brave, for standing up there and dancing with me even though you were terrified, for telling Catherine Fairfax exactly what she needed to hear." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "For being you." "Cole?" I didn't know how to finish that sentence, how to put into words what I was feeling. He saved me from having to try. He leaned down and kissed me, soft and careful, like he was afraid I might break. I kissed him back, my hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my palms. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. Why didn't you? Didn't want to push. Didn't want you to think that was what this was about. He pulled back just enough to look at me. I meant what I said about this being practical, about us being partners. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. For me too, I whispered. We stood there in the moonlight, two people who'd been thrown together by circumstance but had chosen to stay together by will. Two people who'd been broken by the world and had somehow helped each other heal. Come on, Cole said finally. Let's put these horses up and get some rest. Tomorrow's still a working day. Tomorrow would be a working day, and the day after that, and the day after that. There would still be fences to mend and cattle to check, and 100 other tasks that made up the daily rhythm of ranch life. But now those tasks meant something different. Now they were building towards something, not just survival, but a life, a real life with someone who saw me, valued me, maybe even loved me. I wasn't Reed Ridge's joke anymore. I wasn't the girl nobody would choose. I was Cole Rourke's wife. I was a ranch woman with calloused hands and sun-dark skin and strength I'd earned through sweat and perseverance. I was Mara Bell, and I was finally enough. The weeks after the harvest dance felt different. Not because anything dramatic had changed. We still rose before dawn, still worked until our bodies ached, still fell into bed exhausted every night. But something fundamental had shifted between us, like a door had opened that neither of us had the desire to close. Cole started sleeping with his bedroom door open. I started doing the same. Some nights I'd wake to find him standing in my doorway, just checking that I was there, that I was real. Some mornings he'd wake to find me in the kitchen already making coffee, and he'd come up behind me and press a kiss to my shoulder before saying a single word. We were learning each other in new ways, not just as work partners, but as something more complicated and more simple at the same time. He liked his coffee black, but would add sugar if I made it. I hated getting up early, but did it anyway because I liked seeing his face first thing in the morning. Small things, ordinary things, the kind of details that made up a life together. 3 weeks after the dance, we were working on reinforcing the barn roof when we heard horses approaching. Multiple horses, coming fast. Cole straightened immediately, his hand going to the rifle he always kept nearby when we worked outside. Stay behind me. But it wasn't trouble. It was Sarah Webb now, riding hell for leather on a horse that looked half dead from exhaustion, her face streaked with tears and what looked like blood. Sarah! I scrambled down from the roof, Cole right behind me. Sarah practically fell off her horse, and I caught her before she hit the ground. What happened? What did he do? He was drunk, Sarah sobbed. Drunker than usual, started yelling about money, about how I was worthless, about how he should have chosen someone else. Then She broke off, touching her lip where it was split and swelling. He hit me, and when I tried to leave, he said if I ran, he'd find me and make me sorry. Cole's face had gone completely blank, which I'd learned was more dangerous than if he'd shown anger. You did the right thing coming here. Did he follow you? I don't know. I just ran. I took his horse because mine wasn't saddled and I couldn't waste time. You did exactly right. Cole was already moving, checking the perimeter, his eyes scanning the scrubland. Mara, take Sarah inside. Clean her up, get her some food. I'm going to make sure Webb didn't follow her trail. I helped Sarah into the house, settled her at the table, and went to get water and cloth to clean her face. The split lip was bad, but not terrible. The bruise forming on her cheek would be spectacular by tomorrow. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. Don't apologize. You did exactly what Cole told you to do. I dabbed carefully at her lip. You're safe here. That's what matters. But Marcus will come. He will, Mara. He's mean when he's drunk, and he'll see this as me defying him. Let him come. Cole can handle him. Sarah looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. You don't know what Marcus is like when he's angry. He's dangerous. So is Cole. I finished cleaning her face and went to get bread and cheese. You haven't seen him angry yet, but I have. Trust me. Marcus Webb should be more worried about what Cole will do to him than the other way around. Cole came back 20 minutes later, his expression still that dangerous blank. No sign of pursuit yet, but he'll come. Might take him a while to figure out where she went, but he'll come. He looked at Sarah. You're staying here. I don't care what your husband thinks about it. You're staying until we figure out something permanent. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling. Cole poured himself coffee, his movements controlled but tight. No woman gets beaten in her own home and then sent back to the man who did it. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what the sheriff says. I don't care what anyone says. You're under my protection now. Sarah started crying again, but this time it looked like relief more than fear. Marcus Webb showed up 3 days later, and he brought company, Sheriff Drummond and 2 deputies, all of them armed and looking official. Cole met them in the yard, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. I stood on the porch with Sarah behind me, watching the confrontation unfold. Cole Rourke, Drummond called out. I'm here on official business. Marcus Webb has filed a complaint that you're harboring his wife against her will. Against her will? Cole's voice was flat. Sarah, you want to go back with your husband? No, Sarah said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. I don't. Drummond shifted in his saddle. Mrs. Webb, your husband says you ran away in a fit of female hysteria. Says you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. He beat me. He's been beating me with words for months, and 3 days ago he started using his fists. I'm not going back to that. Marcus Webb pushed his horse forward, and even from the porch I could see his face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot. That's a lie. I never laid a hand on her. She fell? She fell, Cole repeated, his tone making it clear exactly what he thought of that explanation. That's interesting, because the bruises on her face look an awful lot like knuckle marks. She's my wife. This is between me and her. No. Once you started hitting her, it became everyone's business. Cole raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it at anyone, just making its presence more obvious. She stays here. You want to contest that, you can try. But I promise you, Webb, you won't like how that turns out. Drummond cleared his throat. Now, Cole, I understand your feelings on this, but the law is clear. A wife's place is with her husband. The law is clear about assault too, Sheriff. You going to arrest Webb for beating his wife, or are you just here to help him collect his property? Cole's eyes were hard. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Not law, not justice, just making sure the established order stays established. You're putting me in a difficult position here. Good. You put me in a difficult position when you forced that marriage selection. You put Sarah in a difficult position when you married her off to a drunk who you knew damn well had a violent streak. So yes, Sheriff, I'm putting you in a difficult position. Welcome to the club. The standoff lasted another few minutes, tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Drummond shook his head. I'll have to report this. The town council will want to discuss it. You do that. And while you're at it, ask them how many other women are stuck in marriages like Sarah's because of that asinine selection you forced on everyone. Cole lowered the rifle. Now get off my property. They left, but I knew it wasn't over. Marcus Webb looked back over his shoulder with pure hatred in his eyes, and Sheriff Drummond's face was tight with anger at being defied in front of his deputies. That's going to cause trouble, I said when they were out of sight. Let it cause trouble. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Cole came up onto the porch, his jaw still tight. You did good, Sarah, standing up to him like that. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. What if the sheriff decides you're breaking the law? What if they try to force me back? They can try. They won't succeed. Cole looked at me. We might need to make a trip to Santa Rosa, talk to a real lawyer, find out what Sarah's options are for ending this marriage legally. You do that? Sarah's voice cracked. Help me get free of him? Of course. What kind of people would we be if we didn't? He turned to go back to work, then paused. You're not alone anymore, Sarah. Remember that. Over the next week, the situation in Reed Ridge deteriorated. Cole made the trip to Santa Rosa and came back with news. The marriage could be annulled on grounds of cruelty and failure to provide, but it would require testimony, witnesses, and a judge willing to go against standard practice. The lawyer said it won't be easy, Cole reported that evening over dinner. Most judges side with husbands as a matter of course, But he thinks we've got a case, especially with the visible injuries and Mara as a witness to Sarah's condition when she arrived. How long will it take? Sarah asked. Couple months, maybe more. You'll need to stay here until it's settled. He looked at her seriously. You okay with that? Because if Marcus comes back, let him come. I'm not going back to him no matter what. Sarah's chin was up, her eyes determined. I'd rather die than go back to that house. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I reached across the table and took her hand. You won't have to go back. We'll make sure of it. News of our defiance spread through Reed Ridge like wildfire. Some people were outraged. How dare Cole Rourke interfere in a legal marriage? Others were quietly supportive, women especially, who understood all too well what Sarah was running from. The town split into factions, and we found ourselves at the center of a controversy we'd never asked for. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Catherine Fairfax showed up at our ranch. Alone, which was surprising enough that Cole actually let her approach before telling her to leave. I'm not here to cause trouble, Catherine said, sitting stiffly in our kitchen like the chair might contaminate her expensive dress. I'm here because I need to know if what you did for Sarah, you'd do for others. I stared at her. What are you talking about? Catherine's perfect composure cracked slightly. Richard, my husband, he's not violent like Marcus Webb, but she struggled for words. He treats me like a doll, something to display and show off, but never actually listen to or respect. I thought that's what marriage was supposed to be, but seeing you two, seeing what you've built. She looked at me directly. I was cruel to you. For years I was unspeakably cruel, and I'm sorry. The apology was so unexpected that I actually couldn't speak for a moment. Cole, ever practical, just poured Catherine a cup of coffee. What exactly are you asking for? He said. Information. Options. The name of that lawyer in Santa Rosa. Catherine wrapped her hands around the cup. I'm not brave like Sarah. I'm probably not going to leave Richard. The scandal would destroy my family, and I don't have anywhere else to go. But I want to know that I could. I want to know there's a choice, even if I never take it. I looked at Cole, and he nodded slightly. I pulled out the paper with the lawyer's information and slid it across the table to Catherine. His name is William Chen. He's Mrs. Chen, the seamstress's nephew. He specializes in cases like this. I paused. And Catherine, you're braver than you think. It takes courage to even ask the question. Catherine left with the paper tucked into her purse, her perfect mask back in place, but something different in her eyes. After she was gone, Sarah spoke up from where she'd been listening in the other room. That was unexpected. People are full of surprises, Cole said. Sometimes good ones. The legal proceedings started a month later. Cole, Sarah, and I made multiple trips to Santa Rosa, meeting with the lawyer, giving testimony, building a case. It was exhausting and frightening and sometimes seemed hopeless. But we kept pushing forward. Marcus Webb tried to contest it, of course. He showed up at the courthouse drunk and belligerent, yelling about his rights and his property. The judge, a stern woman named Martinez, who'd seen too many cases like this, took one look at Sarah's still healing bruises and Marcus's bloodshot eyes and made her decision quickly. Marriage annulled. Mr. Webb, you are hereby ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from Sarah Miller at all times. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Judge Martinez brought down her gavel. This court is adjourned. Sarah cried the whole way back to Reed Ridge, but this time the tears were relief, freedom, joy. She'd gotten what so few women in her position ever got, a way out. What will you do now? I asked her as we neared the ranch. I don't know. Find work, I suppose. Maybe move to Santa Rosa, start fresh somewhere nobody knows me as Marcus Webb's wife. She smiled through her tears. Thank you, both of you. I know saying it doesn't feel like enough, but thank you. You did the hard part, Cole said. We just helped a little. Sarah stayed with us another 2 weeks while she made arrangements, then left for Santa Rosa with money Cole insisted on giving her and a promise to write. The day she left, the house felt emptier, quieter, like something vital had departed. You think she'll be okay? I asked Cole that evening. Yeah. She's tougher than she looks, than she thought she was. He pulled me close, his arms around my waist. Kind of reminds me of someone else I know. Oh? Who's that? This woman I married. Started out thinking she was worthless. Ended up being the strongest person I've ever met. He kissed the top of my head. Changed my whole life, she did. Funny. I was about to say the same thing about this man I married. I turned in his arms to face him. Cole, I need to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. That's what I need to tell you. I took a breath. I love you. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was all at once. But I love you. And I needed you to know that. Cole's expression went soft, vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. Mara Bell Rourke, I have loved you since the day you didn't quit on me, since you dug those fence posts until your hands bled, since you stood up to Catherine Fairfax at that dance, since you helped Sarah without hesitation, even though it put us in danger. He cupped my face in his rough hands. I love you for being exactly who you are, stubborn and strong and brave even when you don't feel brave. He kissed me then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and I kissed him back with everything I had. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Move into my room, he said. Stop sleeping alone. Be my wife in every sense of the word. I thought you'd never ask. That night, and every night after, I fell asleep in Cole's arms, feeling safe and wanted and loved in ways I'd never imagined possible. We built a life together, piece by piece, day by day, two broken people who'd somehow made each other whole. 3 months after Sarah's annulment, Reedridge held another town dance. This time, when Cole asked if I wanted to go, I didn't hesitate. Absolutely, I've been practicing. Practicing. In the barn, when you were out checking cattle. Don't laugh, I wanted to get better. Cole didn't laugh. He just pulled me into his arms right there in the kitchen and started humming, moving me through the steps in our tiny space. We danced between the table and the stove, my work dress swishing against his legs, both of us smiling like fools. You have gotten better, he said. I've had good motivation. Wanted to make you proud. Mara, you make me proud every single day. Dancing's just a bonus. When we arrived at the town hall that Saturday night, I walked in with my head high and my hand in Cole's, wearing the green dress that had survived multiple wearings and still looked good. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different, less hostile, more curious. Mrs. Chen was there, and she gave me an approving nod. A few other women smiled at me, genuine smiles, not the fake ones I'd grown up with. Even Sheriff Drummond, though he didn't look happy about it, nodded in acknowledgement. Things had changed in Reedridge. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Sarah's case had started conversations, made people think, forced the town to confront some uncomfortable truths about the marriages that had come out of that forced selection. 2 more women had quietly left their husbands since then. One had moved away. Another had found work at the boarding house and was living independently. The town council had been forced to admit that maybe, just maybe, their grand plan hadn't worked out quite as well as they'd hoped. And Cole and I had become something unexpected, proof that sometimes the worst situations could lead to the best outcomes, if people were willing to work for it. The music started, and Cole led me onto the dance floor. We'd both improved since the harvest dance, practiced steps instead of desperate improvisation, though we still weren't perfect. We never would be perfect, and that was fine. Perfect was boring. Perfect was for people like Catherine Fairfax, who'd divorced Richard 3 weeks ago and was apparently dating the lawyer in Santa Rosa now. We danced 3 songs, then took a break for punch. As we stood at the refreshment table, Ma approached nervously. Mara, could I speak with you for a moment? Cole squeezed my hand and moved away, giving us space. Ma stood there wringing her hands, looking older and smaller than I remembered. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, for how I treated you, for all those years of making you feel like you weren't enough, when the truth was... She stopped, swallowed hard. The truth was I was ashamed of myself, for not being able to provide better, for not being able to protect you, for failing as a mother, and instead of dealing with that, I took it out on you. Made you think you were the problem when really it was me. I'd imagined this conversation 100 times, always with me saying something cutting or just walking away. But now that it was happening, all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying anger, tired of the weight of all those years. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. I do. But Ma, I can't just forgive everything and pretend it didn't happen. You hurt me. Deeply, for a long time. I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did to you, and I see who you've become despite it. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time ever. You're stronger than I ever was, braver, better, and I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. My throat felt tight. Thank you for saying that. Would you ever consider visiting, maybe for Sunday dinner sometime? I'd understand if you said no. I thought about it. About holding on to grudges versus building something new. About the woman I'd been versus the woman I'd become. Maybe, I said. Eventually. But Ma, if I come, it has to be different. You can't criticize me or try to change me or make me feel small again. I won't tolerate that anymore. I understand, and I'll try. That's all I can promise. That I'll try to do better. Ma reached out hesitantly, and I let her take my hand for just a moment before pulling away. Thank you for listening. She walked away, and Cole materialized at my side like he'd been waiting just out of sight. You okay? Yeah, I think I am. I leaned into him. It's strange, you know? I thought confronting her would feel bigger, more dramatic, but it just feels done. Like closing a door I should have closed years ago. Sometimes that's all it is. Just done. He kissed my temple. You want to dance some more, or are you ready to head home? I looked around the room one last time, at the people who'd mocked me, dismissed me, tried to make me believe I was worthless, at the town that had been both my prison and my proving ground, at all of it. Actually, I said slowly, I have a different idea. What's that? I want to dance, right in the middle of the floor. I want everyone to see us together and know that we're not ashamed, not hiding, not apologizing for existing. I met his eyes. I want them to see exactly what they almost destroyed and know that they failed. Cole's smile was fierce. Then let's give them a show they won't forget. We walked onto the dance floor as a new song started, something slower and more intimate than what had been playing before. Cole pulled me closer than was probably proper for a town dance, and I didn't care. His hand was firm on my waist, mine on his shoulder, and we started to move. But this time, something was different. This time, we weren't just dancing, we were claiming space, demanding respect, showing everyone in that room exactly what we'd built together. I saw Catherine watching with something like longing in her eyes, saw Mrs. Chen nodding approvingly, saw other women whispering to their husbands, pointing at us like we were something worth noting. And I saw the men who'd refused to choose me at that selection, the ones who'd laughed when Cole stepped forward, watching us now with expressions ranging from confusion to something that might have been regret. Cole spun me, and my skirts flared out. He dipped me, and I trusted him to hold me. We moved together like we'd been dancing for years instead of months, like we'd been made to fit together instead of thrown together by circumstance. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence. Then someone started clapping, then someone else, then more, until the whole room was applauding, and I realized with a shock that they were applauding us. Cole didn't seem surprised. He just bowed slightly, kept his arm around my waist, and led me off the floor. How did you know they'd react like that? I asked, breathless. I didn't. But I knew we'd be fine either way, because we have each other. Everything else is just noise. He grabbed our coats. Come on, let's go home. We rode back to the ranch under a sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. The air was cool, but not cold, perfect for riding, and Bess and Cole's stallion moved in easy rhythm. You know what I realized tonight? I said. What's that? I spent my whole life wanting to be chosen, wanting someone to look at me and decide I was worth something, but that's not what happened with us. No? No, you chose me, yes, but more importantly, I chose you back. I chose to stay, to work, to build this life. I chose us. I looked over at him. That's better than being chosen. That's being equal. Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. You're right, and for the record, I choose you too. Every day. Every single day. We reached the ranch and put the horses away together, working in comfortable silence, our movements synchronized from months of practice. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, lit by the lamp we'd left burning in the window. Home. This was home. Not the house I'd grown up in with Ma's disapproval soaking into the walls. Not Reedridge with its cruel laughter and small-minded judgments. This ranch, this man, this life we'd built together from nothing but determination and stubbornness and unexpected love. Cole pulled me into his arms in the middle of the main room, and we swayed together even though there was no music, just the sound of wind outside and our own breathing. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not giving up. For being stronger than either of us knew. For proving that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. He pulled back to look at me. For being my partner, my wife, my everything. I stood on my toes and kissed him, pouring into it everything I felt but couldn't quite say. Gratitude and love and wonder that this life was mine, that this man was mine, that I'd survived everything meant to destroy me and come out the other side stronger. I love you, I said against his lips. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared. I've got you. Always. That night, wrapped in Cole's arms in the bed we shared, I thought about the girl who'd stood in that town square 2 months ago, certain she'd be the joke of Reedridge forever. That girl who'd believed she was worthless, unloved, unwanted. I wished I could go back and tell her what was coming. Tell her that the man who chose her would be the best thing that ever happened to her, that she'd find strength she never knew she had, that she'd build a life worth living, with someone worth building it with. But maybe she wouldn't have believed me. Maybe she needed to live through it, to earn it, to discover it for herself. Either way, that girl was gone now. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who'd claimed her space in the world, who'd transformed from the girl nobody would choose into the woman who chose herself. And that woman was happy. Not perfectly happy. There were still hard days, still struggles, still moments of doubt, but happy in the ways that mattered, happy in the work, and the partnership, and the love. Happy in the life she'd built with her own 2 hands, and the man who'd seen her when everyone else looked away. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Cole already awake beside me, watching me with that soft expression he got sometimes. Morning, he said. Morning. I stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles well used. What time is it? Early, but I was thinking we could sleep in today. Take a break from the ranch work. Just be together. Cole Rourke suggesting we skip work? Are you feeling all right? He laughed, actually laughed, and pulled me closer. I'm feeling better than all right. I'm feeling like the luckiest man in New Mexico territory. Only New Mexico? Aim higher. Fine. Luckiest man in the world. Better? Much better. We spent the morning in bed, talking and laughing and loving each other, making up for all the years we'd both spent alone. When we finally got up, it was past noon and we made a lazy lunch together, bumping into each other in the small kitchen, stealing kisses between tasks. This was what I'd never known I was missing. Not grand gestures or fancy things, but simple moments of joy with someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved what they found. That evening, as the sun was setting and painting the scrubland in shades of gold and red, we sat on the porch together. Cole had his arm around me, and I had my head on his shoulder, and we watched the sky change colors in comfortable silence. You know what I think? Cole said finally. What? I think we should have another dance, right here, right now. There's no music. Don't need music. We've got each other. That's enough. He stood and pulled me to my feet, and we danced there on the porch with no music except the wind and the distant sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. We moved slowly, holding each other close. 2 people who'd found their way to something real. And somewhere in Reedridge, people were probably still talking about us, still gossiping about the odd couple who shouldn't have worked. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them spend their time worrying about our business while we spend our time living our lives. because we'd proven something they'd never expected, that the girl nobody would choose could become the woman everyone noticed, that strength wasn't about size or appearance but about refusing to quit, that love wasn't about perfection but about choosing each other again and again through all the imperfect moments that made up a life. We'd started as strangers forced together by a cruel circumstance. We'd become partners, friends, lovers, and finally something that had no easy definition, just two people who fit together in all the ways that mattered. The sun finally set, leaving us in darkness broken only by the stars overhead. Cole kissed me one more time, soft and sweet and full of promise, then led me inside to the home we'd built together. Tomorrow, there would be work again. Fences to mend, cattle to check, 100 tasks that made up ranch life. There would be trips to town where we'd face the stares and whispers of people who still didn't understand us. There would be challenges and struggles and moments of doubt. But there would also be this: love and partnership and the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I was no longer the girl nobody would choose. I was Mara Rourke, and I was chosen, choosing, and completely, wonderfully whole.